to Horror Month.
Welcome back to Box Office Maniacs and Horror Month, or Horror Year 2020. So the first movie review I have for you is of a movie that came out in 1988. And it's kind of a classic. It's kind of a cult classic. There's lots of people that like this movie. And there might even be some people that have never heard of this movie. It could almost be one of our forgotten films. David and I definitely wanted to review this for you guys, but never got the chance to do it. So, here it is, the movie Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Now, for those of you out there, which, the younger crowd out here, for those of you who do not know who Elvira is, let me explain. I know people like me, who've been in the horror genre for a long, long time, and followed the horror genre for a long time. They know who Elvira is. There's no explaining. But for those of you younger viewers that don't know who Elvira is, back in the 80s, Elvira had a television show called Elvira's Movie Macabre. And it came on weekly, and she would show old films. She would show things like Dracula, Frankenstein, things like that, but she also showed the B movies, the bad ones, who us as horror genre lovers, we probably know these bad movies. We know a lot of the good movies, and they're classics to us now. But back then, it was like they were groaners, they were campy, they were cheesy, and sometimes they were downright crappy. But she would show the bad ones as well as some of the good ones. When I first moved here to Florida, we had a guy down here that did the same thing. And he was a horror movie host, and he would show good films, he would show bad films. He showed Frankenstein and Dracula and things like that, but he also showed Chud, or Trolls, or Ghoulies, or things like that as well. The really B movies. And every once in a while he did specials, and he would show like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. Especially around this time of year, Halloween. And his name was Dr. Paul Bearer. And he had a show called Creature Feature. And that's what he would show. And he would do the same thing that Elvira would do. A little differently, but pretty much the same thing. It was... he would sit in his little castle, and he would eat a bowl of cream of wheat, but it wasn't called cream of wheat, it was called scream of wheat. And he would have these little bad puns like that throughout his little spiel, but it was always fun, and he was entertaining, he was fun to watch, and the movies that he showed and poked fun at, it was fun to watch. It was entertaining, and that's what Elvira did. It made these old films entertaining to watch, because even if you didn't care for the movie so much, you wanted to see Elvira. What happened with Elvira eventually is she got so popular that she started doing TV ads like Coors and little things here and there, like different little TV shows and whatnot. She would pop on, do little skits here and there. And she got so popular about it that it actually caught the attention of Brandon Torikoff, who owned NBC at the time. And he actually wanted to do an actual series with her. But she turned it down because she wanted to do a movie about Elvira. So eventually, NBC ended up owning this backlot of where they had all these facades of different buildings and whatnot, much like Universal, and it was in Burbank, and they had this whole backlot, and that's where they actually filmed most of this movie, was in that backlot. So once they were able to obtain this backlot and be able to film there, Brandon Torikoff actually came up back to Elvira and said, hey, I think we can make your movie. Would you be interested? Well, that's how this movie came about. Now, the one thing about this movie is it's not a horror film. There's horror in it, but it's not so much a horror film as it is a comedy. It's more comedic, and everything is a pun or a sarcastic jab at things, and it's fun. It's a fun film, and it's not gory or bloody or anything like that, but it's fun to watch. It's entertaining. It's still got a horror element to it, which, you know, it's Elvira, so it has to have that. So it's got this horror element to it, but it's not like... It's not Friday the 13th, you know? It's not Hellraiser. It's this goofy kind of horror, and it's safe for kids, is what I'm getting at. It became really kid-friendly. And there's some little... Because it's Elvira, I mean, there is some innuendo to it, but it's nothing really raunchy or racy or anything like that. It's safe. It's a safe movie, but it's fun to watch. It's actually really fun to watch. Now, this movie came out in 1988. I didn't actually see it at the theaters. I saw it when it came to VHS. And I think that was the last time I actually watched it in its entirety. From over the years, I think I've seen bits and pieces of it, but never watched it from beginning to end like I did that first time. Because they don't really play it like they would Halloween or Freddy or Chucky or anything like that. Elvira is not one of them, which is weird that they don't play this. But they do occasionally throw it on television. Now, about the movie itself. What the movie is about is that Elvira, and this was her dream for this film actually, was to really flesh out the character of Elvira. The character of Elvira is played by Cassandra Peterson. And Cassandra Peterson actually helped write the film, and of course, playing Elvira, she was able to add a lot of different ad-libs to it, and ad-libs to the writing and everything. So like her cast on the movie Macabre Show actually helped her write the film. And as they would write and come up with these ideas, she would say, well, Elvira would do this, or Elvira would do that. So she helped a lot with that, but with the character and the look and the whole thing about Elvira, she wanted to flesh out a actual story for her and where she came from and what she's all about. Even down to showing what's on her, like the little knife she keeps in her waistband, or the amulet she has on her finger, or, you know, how she does her hair, or what she does while she was doing the movie Macabre. That's where it actually starts, is her doing the movie Macabre Show in the television studio. So she wanted to have all that, but she also wanted to kind of show where Cassandra Peterson comes from too, and kind of her beginnings as well. But of course, it's mostly geared around Elvira. So in the story, Elvira's aunt, Morgana, passes away and leaves her a house, a dog, and a book. So she has to go to Falwell, Massachusetts to pick up the house, the dog, and the book, or to claim this stuff. So she goes to Falwell, Massachusetts. Well, Falwell is a made-up town. I don't know if there's actually a Falwell out there, Massachusetts, but it's a made-up town for the story, and of course pointing at Jerry Falwell. And the reason being is because this town, and a lot of the people in it, most of the people in it, are something that would not have Elvira there. It is completely the opposite end of what Elvira is, and that's the point of it. So she goes to this town, and it kind of interrupts their nicey white picket fence little town. It interrupts the whole vibe of the town as she comes in the macabre mobile and stirs everything up. There's a lot of actors in here that I actually forgot were in this movie. Eda McClurg plays a character named Chastity Pariah, who is on the town council, who's like the leader of the town council, and she is one of these people that is, very goody two-shoes. She doesn't want the town disrupted. She doesn't want anyone like Elvira to be there. So, immediately she's against her even coming into the town and tries to drive her out. So that's Edie McClurg, and she does a really good job. Of course, she's coming off of the fame of Ferris Bueller's Day Off at this point, and some people would even recognize her from an actual horror movie that she did quite some years ahead of this. Was Stephen King's, well, it wasn't Stephen King's movie, but it was based on Stephen King's story, and the movie is Carrie, where she was fantastic in that, and she actually does a good part in this. She's not bad in here. She's funny, she's interesting to watch, but very predictable. Then there's Kurt Fuller, who plays a real estate agent who tries to help Elvira get rid of, or offers to help Elvira get rid of the house, and ends up kind of taking advantage of Elvira. Kurt Fuller, you might recognize as, I believe his name was Jack Hordemeyer in Wayne's World. He was the assistant to Rob Lowe, as well as the assistant to the mayor in Ghostbusters 2. Then there is Jeff Conway, who everyone would recognize as Kenickie from Grease. So, of course, Jeff Conway was also in the TV show Taxi, and I think at this point, this is about the time that his acting career was really going. I think this might have been one of his last-ditch efforts to possibly stay on track as far as the acting goes, but there's not much that he did in here. It's not bad. It's not terrible what he does, but it's just not a whole lot. He's kind of just there, and he's one of these bumbling sidekick kind of characters, and it's just, there's not a whole lot for him, unfortunately, which is sad, because he's not a bad actor. It's just, it's sad that, he couldn't keep it together. So then there's a character named Uncle Vincent. Good name. But aside from the great name, Uncle Vincent was actually supposed to be originally played by Vincent Price. That's who Elvira wanted for this movie, was Vincent Price to be in it and play her uncle. But Vincent Price, at this point in time in 1988, was finished with horror films, so he turned it down. He's like, I don't want to do any more horror. But, and considering as old as he was at that point, yeah, maybe, I can see it. But then again, he would have been perfect for this. I wish he would have done it. But the guy they got to do it, W. Morgan Shepherd, actually didn't do a bad job. He was alright. He did a good job. He was decent. He was sinister when he needed to be sinister, and he was creepy when he needed to be creepy. So he didn't do a bad job. But it would have been nice to see Vincent Price do it. And lastly, there is a whole group of teenagers in this film. And for some reason, there was like a contract or something in the contract that said they had to have teenagers in this movie. So they had to stick all these teenagers in there. Well, there wasn't really much for them to do other than what they end up doing in the film. So they kind of had them bunched all together through a lot of the scenes. But there's three in particular that kind of break away from the group, and they're doing all they can to try to sneak a peek at Elvira. And this is where the film does kind of teeter on that innuendo part, of Elvira, but it still doesn't get all raunchy or racy or anything like that. One particular teenager that stands out is Ira Heiden, this nerdy little kid with glasses, the character of Bo in this movie. But you might recognize him right away as Will Stanton from Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. Yes, he was one of the Dream Warriors. He was the Wizard Master! I am the Wizard Master! That's right. The Wizard Master, the one in the wheelchair that went after Freddy. The Dream Warrior in the wheelchair. Yep, that was him. And he's in this movie, but he's not bad. But he plays the part he has to play, which is this a nerdy little teenager. But there's not really much for him to do as well, other than that. And like I said, he kind of gets grouped in with all the other teenagers that didn't have much to do in this movie. So overall, the movie is not a bad film. It's not all necessarily comedy, but it's not all necessarily horror either. And I think there's a good balance between the two. It's creepy, it's campy, very campy. The dialogue is a little clunky. And like I said, some of it's a little bit predictable. But it's, all in all, it is a fun film. It is a fun, nostalgic film. And the funny part is, about this film, as a matter of fact, was that here it was, I had bought this, and I had it sitting there on my desk, and at the time I had bought it, I was going to mention to Dave that, hey, we should, review Elvira. It would be great to review Elvira. And didn't happen, but I was sitting there looking at it and was like, you know what, I really want to watch this movie. I'm going to go ahead and watch it, and yeah, I'm going to go ahead and review it for Horror Month. So I put it in and watched it. And the funny part is after I got done watching it, I went back to my computer and I was sitting there looking across Facebook, and lo and behold, something came up that said, on this date, September 30th, 1988, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark premiered. And it was the exact same day I watched Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. It was kind of funny. It was just a coincidence. But I tend to think it might have been also David nudging me, going, yeah, go ahead and do this one. So, maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But I like to be happy and think so. So the first of the extras on here, of course, there's 3 different commentaries. And the first one features Cassandra Peterson and Edie McClurg. This audio commentary is fun. It's fun to listen to. There's some information to it, but not a lot. It's mostly Cassandra Peterson and her kind of joking back and forth and talking about the film, but not really giving a whole lot away or really explaining a whole lot. And as a matter of fact, a lot of times Cassandra Peterson, you can hear her literally change from being Cassandra Peterson, the actress, to Elvira. So it's kind of like you're getting Elvira commenting on the movie. Like I said, fun commentary, but not a whole lot of information, really. So the second audio commentary on here, I really had trouble getting through. It's good for the fact that you have, as an interviewer, sort of, or moderator or something, I don't know what they necessarily call these guys, but he's the one kind of leading the interview in this commentary. And it is Tony Timpone, the editor of Fangoria magazine, that's doing this interview. And he's doing it with the director, James Svengoolie, or Svengali. Spanaguli? Swanson? No, Signorelli. That's, well, I was way off. No, anyway, James Signorelli. So he ends up doing an interview with the director during this commentary. This is terrible. I don't. You'd think this would be a good idea, you know, to have an editor of Fangoria magazine interviewing the director of this movie. No, it wasn't a good idea. And the reason why it wasn't a good idea is not because of Tony Timpone. It's because of the director, James Signorelli. It's because of him. Because literally the audio commentary goes like this. So Elvira has a wig. So how many hours did it take to put Elvira's wig on? Well, it took about 2 hours, 3 hours. She had to sit there for a while. That's literally this audio commentary. So then when he starts doing this, and he does it a few times at the beginning of the audio commentary, Tony Timpone finally has to go on to the next question. So he's like, okay, the Macabmobile, that is a great car. Where did the Macabmobile originate from? Where did it come from? Yeah, it was a good car. It was perfect for Elvira. Literally, he does that all the way through this audio commentary. Everything's like short, quick answers, nothing of substance. There's no information whatsoever. It was literally almost yes and no answers to these great questions, actually, that Tony Timpone was giving him. But he just wouldn't answer him, and it was like pulling teeth out of this guy to actually answer. And literally, at one point, he stops and he says, oh, I'm sorry, I was watching the film there, because I haven't watched this in a while, so. I hope everyone's enjoying it. Literally, he says that. It's like, really, dude? and that's something that David and I always got kind of irritated with, is when you know they're watching the film, but then they stop for like 10 minutes and you don't hear anything, or 20 minutes even, where you're just watching the movie and you don't hear anybody. You forget that you're even watching a commentary. It's not quite that bad in here, because Tony Timpone does try to keep it going, but that's what makes this one a terrible commentary. Now, the third commentary is actually much, much better, and if you're wanting to look for information about the movie, that's probably the better one to listen to. It's got way more information to it, and probably the reason being for that is that it's hosted by Patterson Lindquist, who is the webmaster of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark.com, as well as being the host on a small TV show that I seem to remember seeing scenes from, but I've never actually watched the entire show. They did a TV show called The Search for the Next Elvira. So, where Elvira was actually looking for another Elvira to take her place. And he was one of the judges. So, with that, he obviously knows a lot about this movie and a lot about Elvira herself. So if you want some information, that's a good one to actually get it from. And speaking of lots of information, the first featurette on this extras on this Blu-ray disc is Too Macabre, the making of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. This thing is about 2 hours long, and it goes through everything. It goes through Cassandra Peterson's background, it goes through the whole thing about NBC and Brandon Todorkoff, and it goes into everything in great detail about Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. And it has a lot of the people that were in the movie in this interview. And from what it says on the back of the cover here, it's a 2018 remastered version of this, or redone, newly remastered, restored version of this making of. So there's, I believe, extra stuff to it, but I wouldn't know what that was. I just know it's about 2 hours long. But it is very informative, and I did find out some things that I didn't know about Cassandra Peterson. Like, for instance, I knew she came from LA and had this show of Elvira, but I didn't really know her actual backgrounds, which was she was a Las Vegas showgirl, as well as, which makes sense with the end of this movie. Also, she was part of a comedy troupe called The Groundlings, and way back when. And that's where a lot of her comedy comes from, is this being in The Groundlings. So with all that history, it was like, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know all of that. I knew about Elvira, but I didn't really know about Elvira. So it was interesting to find out. But the really funny part about this making of is they show Ira Heiden, the Wizard Master from Nightmare on Elm Street 3, is in here. And here's what's so funny about this, is that the dude is obviously older. This was filmed in 2018, and he's obviously older, but he still looks nerdy. He still has his glasses. He still has kind of that, you know, the nerdy Will Stanton look. But the funniest part is, he still has Will Stanton's voice. He literally sounds as though exactly the same. Like, his voice has never changed. It's never gotten any higher, and it's never gotten any lower. It's exactly the same as the Wizard Master from Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and it's really kind of funny to hear him talk, because I kept waiting for him to do that. Like, I am the Wizard Master! Throughout this, I kept waiting for it. He doesn't do it, but, you know, kept waiting for it to happen. I kept waiting for Freddy to go, "Sorry, kid, I don't believe in fairy tales." But, you know. So moving on, the next extra on here is called Recipe of Terror, the creation of the pot monster. Okay, obviously there's a pun with this, but what they're actually talking about is there's a pretty funny scene in the film where Elvira has to cook for her boyfriend in the movie. And so she decides to go into the kitchen and whip up something. So she uses the book to try to find a recipe to make. And she ends up with a monster coming out of this pot. It's a pretty cool scene in the movie. It's pretty funny. It's pretty hilarious. They talk about some of the other special effects and how those came together, but of course mostly it's centered around how they did the creation of the pot monster and how they did the pot monster and all of that. Also featured on here is the original storyboards, as well as an image gallery, and where they show behind the scenes photos and promos and the movie posters and things like that. Then there's also, of course, the trailers, the original trailer, as well as the teaser trailer for the movie. Pretty much standard stuff that comes on a lot of Blu-rays with extra features. So overall, this entire thing was actually a pretty cool Blu-ray. I actually enjoyed it. The movie looks fantastic in Blu-ray because it's a 4K scan of the original film elements. So it's actually 4K, and it looks really, really good. And it actually sounds really good. It's nice, crisp, and clear, and it looks really good. It's restored beautifully. And then the extras, well, they're not the best of extras, but they'll do. I mean, they're decent. It's nothing except for maybe that second audio commentary that kind of left things to be desired. But overall, the extras weren't bad. Kind of standard, but weren't bad. Very informative, definitely. So overall, I would have to give the movie of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, a 4 out of 5. It's a decent movie. It's funny. It's nostalgic, definitely. And a lot of 80s music. And, well, it also has the Macabre-mobile. Who can forget the Macabre-mobile? That perfect car for Elvira. With its barbed wire mirror, rear view mirror, and the barbed wire or the chain steering wheel with all the skulls and the web up in the grill, and oh man, just fantastic car. I actually had a model of it that I started to put together and never got to finish it, but maybe I will at some point. But I've always loved that car. It was definitely one of the cars that stood out, and definitely would be up there with all the other cars, like Christine and the Ecto-1 from Ghostbusters, or the General Lee. I mean, it definitely is up there with all the other movie cars. Great car. Awesome car. Love the car. So there you have it. There's the first movie review for Horror Month 2020. I'm sorry this has taken me a while to do this. I actually had to do this about 3 times. Obviously it's a little harder without having David here to help me review these things, but I'm doing my best. So I hope you enjoyed it, and please come back for more Horror Month, because there will be more Horror Month coming at you real soon.